Thanks for coming. We're here today with Kathryn Guthrie. Kathryn is working as a value builder, helping to create valuable and transferable businesses, basically to help turn businesses into sellable assets. So there's a whole process that goes into that, coaching, really hands-on advisory with business owners to get them to the point where their business is going to actually be attractive to a landscape of potential buyers. And Kathryn helps facilitate that. You're out in Penryn, California. And Kathryn, thanks for being here today. For our viewers, if you're there on YouTube or on our site watching us, or for the podcast, this will also be turned into a podcast for you. So thanks for being here, Kathryn.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And for anyone who is actually watching this, I think you might put two and two together, because we had Daisy in the interview with Stuart, who is Kathryn's husband, their husband and wife combo, where Stuart manages the end transaction through a franchise called Murphy Business as a business broker, business intermediary. And Kathryn is doing everything that's so relevant today, which is helping with the lead up, with the value building, actually getting the business to a point where it's ready to have that valuable transaction. So I think this is gonna be a really interesting discussion, because I've heard of the Value Builder program, and I know what the hands-on coaching process is from a 30,000 foot standpoint, but I really don't know what it actually is. I know you've got this mastermind class, the course that you do. I think you have another one coming up in the fall. So I want to definitely cover kind of what that entails. I think that's gonna be really interesting for our viewers and our listeners. So maybe you can just start by kind of letting me shut up and talk about what it is that you do and what that value builder niche is. Maybe just tell us, for people who aren't familiar at all with the program and the coaching process, what is it? What do you do?
So what I do is work with business owners who are looking at their exit and want to, of course, maximize the value of their business. One of the biggest things that got me involved in the value building consulting is that 70% of businesses listed never transact.
70.
70, and some statistics are as high as 90, depending on how people are looking at the numbers in terms of listing and who's listing and that kind of thing.
Well, so I don't want to step on your toes, but that's really interesting, because so you're saying that the 70% of the businesses that are listed don't sell.
Correct.
So then there's this whole ocean of businesses out there that don't even get to the point where they're ready to list. So that's
which
wow.
is having owned and sold a couple of businesses, I didn't realize how much we were beating the odds. When, it just, to me, you built a business, you sold it. And it seemed like that was an easy, logical thing to do, but it's a little bit harder than that. And one of the biggest reasons is something called valuation gap. And what happens with valuation gap is that the owner takes a quick swag guess at what their business is worth, either based on what they need in order to retire or what somebody has told them is a common multiplier for their business. And so they think, hey, I've got a business that's making $1 million. The multipier's 3, my business is worth $3 million. And when they find out that it's based on EBITDA, or it's based on seller discretionary earnings, or their business is structured in a way that lowers that multiplier, they can get really negatively surprised by the value of their business. And that mismatch in expectations between what they want and what they thought it was worth and what a buyer actually offers them can really derail the process.
Interesting. And so, and that's obviously a big contributor to the 70 to 90% factor, right? The fact that these things aren't selling. We've seen a lot of, I like the SWAG acronym, the strategic wild ass guess, for the viewers in our audience who aren't familiar with that. But in this market, I think if you don't have a realistic valuation and you're going into negotiations with buyers who are looking for some sort of COVID discount, you're SOL as an owner. Really interesting. And you touched on the fact that you touched casually on the fact that you did buy a business, you ran it, you sold it. So you are in the minority there of people who've actually bought businesses and run them and gotten them to a point where they're ready to sell. Maybe if you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think obviously if you're going to go to a coach for a process like this, that's for me a pretty important factor. You'd want to work with somebody who's been there, done that. And I think you're definitely one, Kathryn. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience?
So the first business, I kind of half embarrassed to say that my first entrepreneurial experience was Amway. But I will tell anybody who is out there that the reason that Stuart and I were successful working together was because of all the business tapes we listened to of being kind to your spouse. So,
Right.
it was a good place to start. But really, our first business that we ran together, that was brick and mortar and kind of more traditional, was a coffee distribution business. And as a beginning entrepreneur, I think that one of the real reasons that we were successful is that we bought a business that had value. So the advantage of buying a business over building a business from scratch, and we've done both, is that there was already some structure behind that. There was already some momentum behind that, that we could capitalize on and learn from. It's kind of like riding a horse that's already broke, right?
Right.
So we built that business. We about doubled the size of the business, and through that process, we did brand building. We actually branded our own coffee that was locally roasted. We learned how to do equipment maintenance. I don't know how much you know about the coffee business, but it's kind of like the razor business. Mm-hmm. You give them the hardware and they buy the software, right? So one of the things that we did was buy a lot of coffee equipment, put it on bars, in C-stores and in cafeterias and in other institutional locations, and then they would be obligated to use our product. So we got, we learned contracts, we learned contract enforcement, we learned equipment, we learned online troubleshooting, of course, inventory management and transport issues, running a small fleet of trucks. By small, I mean 3. Right. And of course, managing employees all through that. And then when we sold it, we were kind of at loose ends, and we used the same broker to buy and sell. And I can't emphasize enough how important having a broker is in a transaction. Having somebody participating in the negotiations on both sides was really important for us. And most importantly, having somebody, especially as a first-time buyer, who could be objective about the business. And objective when we were selling it, they could be objective with us and say, hey, you need to change some things about what you're doing. You need to change your accounting. You need to make sure that you're providing really accurate records and that you know what your inventory is, that you track your losses. These were all things that a broker helped us with and helped prepare our business in terms of just documentation for when we were going to sell it. So it was very helpful to have a broker involved.
I love that. I mean, we talk about that at BizNexus all day. We're just trying to match the buyers and sellers with the right brokers for them, because I've been on both sides of a good buy transaction and a bad buy transaction, good sell transaction and bad sell transaction. And the intermediary is always a huge factor in that. So making sure you're with the right intermediary to help guide you through that process. And that's what we built BizNexus for. We bought into that 110%. But what's interesting to me from your perspective and what you're doing, you went into a business that you didn't know, right? You used a broker to help identify something that was stable, had potential for growth, hopefully negotiate a good price. And then you learned it. So you're buying something, you're not starting from scratch. You don't have to go through that whole entrepreneurial gauntlet to get to profitability where all these things flame out. So I'd imagine you had some time to kind of just sit back and learn the business while it was still profitable, right? And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, benefit of buying a business there where you can kind of learn it with the management team in place, with the customers who are buying, with the profits coming in if you're buying the right type of business, if you're not buying a distressed business. But then in terms of doubling the size and getting it to a point to sell, what about that experience are you doing when you're going in and coaching for like the mastermind class, which I want to touch on you? What's that process? How long are you working with these owners? You're basically duplicating what you've done, right? So you're going in and you're showing them what are the areas where we can, focus on the growth story. But I'd imagine you also want to make this attractive to a new buyer who you once were, right? The first time buyer going in to buy a business, when you're working with a broker. How do you help with that program? Talk to us about the value building process.
So the value builder process is actually a 12-month process that's focused on 8 primary areas of business value. And what I found about the value builder program, the reason I'm sold out on it is because it's providing something I wasn't able to find when I was a business owner. As a business owner, I was trying to read business books, become a better business person, understand higher level concepts, make a lot of decisions, but it was all kind of willy-nilly. You'd read a book, you'd get a good idea, you'd start taking notes in the notebook, which got buried under the orders and then lost in the inbox, and then you'd get back to it and you'd have to recreate it because now you couldn't remember what you were doing or where you put the files you were working on. It was a really disorganized process. With value builders, what it provides is a really solid structure for thinking about your business on a monthly basis and really working in the business. So there is a scalability tool that gives you some ways to think about your business specifically. If you're going to scale a product, had I thought about our coffee business, I would have made some different decisions in terms of what was teachable to other people, what was valuable to my customers, and what was going to cause repeat business. So basically automatic customers. So for coffee, we were lucky. We got into what was essentially a subscription business with a hardware component. But things that we would have done differently, or that I would have thought about differently, would have been whether or not we could teach people to service machines and offer that as a service to our to clients in order to have that be a leader for us, or whether or not we could train salespeople better to manage our product. But we didn't think about it with those 3 components together, helping us choose a path forward that was scalable. We kind of stumbled around. We made a lot of mistakes. We had some things that scaled and some things that didn't, which you still will, but this would have just given a tool to focus around.
Right, and it potentially get a better valuation, right, than the one that you got selling your company. But so I mean, the main focus, it sounds like you're going in there and over a 12-month period, you're helping to create these replicable processes, these duplicable processes, so that the new owner will be able to scale it with new employees, with if you're running a small business, depending on what company size you're working with, certainly anything under $1 million, you've got a lot of rotation. I mean, that's the constant frustration with any business owner. So you've got to be able to teach somebody a duplicable process, but also helping to set up these reliable revenues and profits, right? So there's scalability, but then it sounds like you're kind of helping people get themselves out of the out of the driver's seat, right? Kind of.
That's a big part of it. So it's in the value builder system. It's called the hub and spoke model. Hub and spoke model. That's not good. Hub and spoke means that you, as the business owner, are acting as the conduit for all decisions and information. So your business has all of these spokes. You've got sales, you've got operations, you have HR, and everything has to come into you before it gets funneled out to where it needs to go.
Interesting.
More a business owner is the center of their universe. If they're the sun and everything revolves around them, the business is much less valuable. A business that is managed and running itself, where the owner is acting in a CEO capacity, is far more valuable than a business that has the owner at the center and as a roadblock.
Interesting. My wife and I, this is a little digression, but my wife and I have been watching the new Bulls documentary on the Netflix, where it's basically Michael Jordan being Michael Jordan until he finds the triangle offense and learns how to get out of his own way, and they started winning championships. So it kind of sounds a little bit like that, just making sure that you have, you're getting yourself out of the way. Nothing is dependent on the one business owner who won't be part of the equation, right? I mean, if you're, so right now, we're in this crazy time, right? It's July 29th, 2020. You know, we're all operating in the wake of COVID, in the wake of the pandemic. I see a lot of business owners out there. It's all over the place. We have businesses that are going to just have to sell because they're in financial trouble, and it's a good model, but just because of the situation that we're in, they're financially going to be forced into you know, transaction. And then you have businesses that are going along, don't know necessarily what the next 12 to 18 months will look like, but you certainly, I would imagine, want to manage everything in their control to maximize evaluation, to, you know, automate these processes to get their company ready to sell. So your program is 12 months. We're in this environment where maybe the transactions really pick up in Q4, maybe it's going to take a little longer, but right now, what you are offering is there's a clear need for this. So, I mean, what would you say to these business owners who are kind of floundering right now, just getting by? They know they've got a good company, but they want to have their options open on the tail end. I mean, where can they find you? How do they get involved with a mastermind? You know, I would ask you, what should they be looking for? But I'm already just going to make my own opinion there. I think they want to look for somebody who's been there, done that, who's done exactly what you're doing. You're going in and teaching, you know, from the mistakes that you made as a business owner, but you also did something right because you were in a very small percentage that actually sells their business after you doubled it. But now you're working with this proven process to help these owners transfer the value to a new owner. Where can these owners find you? I mean, what would you say to these owners out there who are looking at an uncertain 12 to 18 months?
Well, what I would say is that regardless of whether your business has been closed and you're trying to reopen, or whether your sales are just less than you want and you're looking at, you know, uncertain times and you're not sure what's going to continue, lean businesses are going to be more survivable than businesses that are afraid to make decisions. And one of the worst things that Stuart and I did throughout our business career, probably more in the property management than in the coffee business, is we got emotionally attached to things in our business that weren't serving the business. So during these stressful times, you really need to take stock of what's happening in your business. This is an opportunity to trim where people are going to, and by trim, I don't necessarily mean cut. I mean, trim the sales. It might be a pivot. It might be reducing the number of products you offer and focusing on what's doing well today, but not carrying the burden of the other items that are less profitable and possibly costing you money. In some cases, it's going to be, hey, we've now learned to work remotely. How do we capitalize on this and form our business into what is going to work moving forward versus being married to what it was in the past? And so to find us, our website is focus81cc.com. And we also have a webinar coming up on August 13th, and we'll have a regular schedule moving forward that will end up listed on the website as we schedule those, for things like the 7 essential questions that you need to answer as you move forward out of the COVID environment, whether that's reopening your business or whether that's pivoting and just keeping your business as trim as possible so that you're increasing your multiplier. Because if you can't increase your top line right now, people always think of businesses in terms of how much they make. So if I've got $1 million business, but my EBITDA is 300,000, my multiplier is going to be on that seller discretionary earning of 300,000, right?
Right.
That's a 30% profit margin. So if I add $100,000, what am I adding to the business? Well, only $30,000. So now my business is 330,000, and if my multiplier is 3 times, now it's worth almost $1 million. It doesn't move the needle very much. So that top line revenue, 10%, it's important to improve your revenue. But what if I kept my revenue? What if my revenue dropped and I only had $200,000 of EBITDA, but I changed essential things about my business and moved my multiplier? So instead of being worth 3 times my seller discretionary earning, my business went down $100,000. So now I only have $200,000 of seller discretionary earnings this year. But if I increase that multiplier by just 1 point, I increase the value of my business by an additional $200,000. Moving that multiplier is way more effective, if you can do it, than just adding to the top line revenue. Now, bigger businesses get bigger multipliers. So I'm not saying revenue is not important, but I'm saying in this COVID times, the shift may be, hey, what can I do to get myself out of the center of my business so it's running itself, even though it's a little bit less profitable? If I can improve my multiplier, then I'm going to make a lot more money on my business if I have to sell.
That's so interesting because I did not even really relate this at all to kind of a post-COVID assessment, right? I think a value builder as, okay, you're building a transferable asset and let's look 12, 18 months down the road and how are we going to make this attractive to the new potential buyer. But this is really interesting because it sounds like the first step of your mastermind is really this post-COVID assessment. Like, where's the business in the wake of COVID? What's the, what are the core functions of the business? What's working, what's not working? And what can we focus on over the next 12 to 18 months to make sure that you show the right growth trajectory, but make sure that you've got something that is growing, that is scalable, that is transferable 12, 18 months from now, regardless of what's happening in this crazy world.
Yeah, and it's something that business owners are always doing, but I think more business owners are at a place where they're feeling the need to do it. We always should be doing it. We always should be working on our business in a structured manner. But right now, people have time. They're sitting at home going, what do I do? Or they're in their business thinking, I've had a 30% drop in my billable, whatever it is, my billable product deliveries, my billable services. How do I survive this? What can I manage moving forward? How do I come out of this stronger? I think there's more urgency to the message now. And we will be starting.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? There's more urgency now. And generally speaking, this is something that's important, but it always gets sacrificed for the urgent tasks, right? And as a business owner, you're flat out, depending on the business size, there's too much to get done in any given day. So who's going to talk to a value builder unless, there's a clear reason to do so. That's why I think we see so many businesses just selling late, right? Something happens, there's a medical reason, there's a family reason, the business has to sell on a timeline that isn't optimal, and they should have done a value building course, but they just didn't. Now you've got this COVID environment that does add this level of urgency where, let's survive, let's reassess the business and make sure that we're on track for the next 12 to 18 months, and let's coordinate with somebody. Let's have a wing person to help guide us through this process, and hopefully a system that works. It sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. And what we've seen at BizNexus with the platform is that, especially now, again, we're at the end of July here, April and May, no one knew what the hell was going on, right? And now what we're seeing is that if you have a business that has data, right, that can show data that shows a clear trend to growth post-COVID, right? So if you can show a potential buyer, not only have we survived COVID, but we're tracking up, multiples are significantly better than the businesses that haven't or that are just stagnant. And that makes sense. But when you think about the money that's out there chasing the number of deals, if you can be one of those deals that not only does trend the right way, but has the data, has your books in order, has the records to clearly show that to a potential buyer, then that's going to be really valuable. And I think it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing with your program, is you're not only helping to create that value, but show that value to the potential buyer, right? To get the books in order, to make sure that's presented the right way. And I think that's hugely valuable right now. So we're gonna have to get you back on more of these, Kathryn. But just real quick before we wrap up, just phone, email, website.
Yep. So phone is 916-600-7466. That's a direct line to me at this point. So feel free to give us a call, even if it's just to ask questions about the coaching and consulting process. I'm always happy to talk to folks. And the website is focus81cc.com. So it's 8 drivers of value. One purpose for our conversation is to raise the value of your business, right? So focus81cc.com. And people can look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay, that's great. And if people are reading this on the blog, or they're watching this on YouTube, or even listening to it in the podcast, we'll put all of those links in the notes underneath the video, or in the description of the podcast. And when you have that webinar link, we'll also add that in. So we'll have the link to your LinkedIn. We'll put the webinar in. And Kathryn, thanks so much for doing this. I think this has been great. We'll definitely get you back.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Thank you. Take care, Kathryn. Bye.